There once was a ninja named Jack. He donned armor, slick and all black. He swung his great blade, another enemy he slayed. This game makes you feel like you're on crack. Hey guys, James here with another game review. This time talking about Ghostrunner, a new action platforming game by Polish developer One More Level. In this game, you take on the role of a cyberpunk ninja, known as a Ghostrunner, as you try and slash and dash your way through various platforming puzzles and action set pieces which you need to execute all in one shot. This game is essentially if you took Genji from Overwatch, gave him Mirror's Edge parkour style abilities, plus a little bit of Spider-Man, and made it into a sort of action puzzle game like Super Hot. Whereas Super Hot made you feel like John Wick, this game makes you feel like a badass cyber ninja warrior. Overall, the game does a lot really well, but this game is definitely not for everyone, and while I did enjoy the experience, I'm not sure I would want to return to this game ever again after beating it. So Ghostrunner, from a gameplay perspective, tries to mix in a couple of different genres of games, and I think it succeeds to varying degrees in each. Throughout the game, you'll be going through some platforming sections where you'll be running along walls and jumping on zip lines. In most levels though, the platforming can feel a bit simple and maybe even a bit too linear. Usually it just involves you finding the right wall to run on, and you keep on following the lit up path until you reach your next checkpoint. This made me feel like a lot of my deaths in platforming sections weren't necessarily because the platforming was difficult, but rather because I just wasn't sure where the next wall was. Meanwhile, the levels, at least for the platforming sections, don't usually give you multiple potential paths, and I feel like that's something that might have helped make the game feel more alive and vibrant. Thankfully, the movement overall feels really satisfying and it makes you feel like you can do just about anything. Running along walls feels good, and in particular, I think parts where you're sliding down and gaining momentum feel particularly great. However, the platforming itself can feel a bit inconsistent at times. There were some times where I felt like for whatever reason, I just couldn't quite get sticky on some walls or rails, even though I felt like I should have hit them. I'm sure I messed up plenty, but it just became an annoyance at times. The most fun parts of the game are usually the combat encounters, and these usually include a bit of platforming mixed in as well. Each encounter usually involves a bunch of enemies spread across a level, and you'd have to figure out a quick and safe way to kill each of them. Along with your platforming skills, you're also given some bullet time skills, allowing you to slow down time and dodge incoming projectiles or enemies. Additionally, throughout the course of the game, you learn other different abilities which you can use to help you beat levels. These include a dash attack, a ranged wave attack, some mind control, and more. The combat is done really well, and it's actually really satisfying, and you really feel it when you slash up an enemy. The combat sections were usually pretty well designed, being very fast-paced, reaction and timing based, as well as being quite punishing. All it takes is one hit from an enemy to kill you and force you to start over at the checkpoint, so beating these sections can actually take a ton of tries for you to figure out. Each time you go, you need to think about what route you should take, what enemies you should kill first, and what moves or skills you should use when. It can definitely be frustrating dying over and over again, but sometimes everything just clicks and you get a super satisfying run through a level which makes you say, fuck yeah. The great mechanics and more free design of these combat sections made them feel a lot more creative and interesting than the pure platforming sections. The enemy design was solid, although maybe a bit unremarkable. The AI for the enemies isn't great and they usually don't move around much, but maybe if they were smarter, this game might have been impossible. They had an interesting mix of enemies, and the different combinations of enemies made for some interesting challenges. There was one enemy type though, the dudes who can run along the walls and explode, which I did not enjoy at all. The puzzle sections were probably some of my least favorite parts of the game. These often take place in this cyber void, Matrix-like world, which I personally wasn't a huge fan of. The actual design of the world was great, but sometimes it felt almost like too much was going on at once. At times, it became hard for me to tell where I was going, and it would occasionally make me feel sick with all the color and effects going on. The puzzles themselves are usually a bit unremarkable. Some felt a bit cryptic at times, and there was one platforming puzzle which was incredibly frustrating and just not enjoyable at all. One puzzle aspect I did like though was the upgrade system. When you unlock skills, it would also unlock different Tetris-like pieces which you could place into your inventory in order to upgrade your combat skills. The system was pretty cool and really made you choose between certain abilities and combinations. The graphics and sound are pretty top quality, but at the same time, almost a bit generic? From a visual standpoint, the graphics are gorgeous and they really nail down the classic cyberpunk feel and design, but at the same time, I feel like this could have been just about any cyberpunk world. I would say the same for the audio as well. I really enjoyed the soundtrack. It was booming, haunting, and intense. The voiceovers were solid as well, but maybe due to the writing, almost every character felt sort of generic and like some sort of cyberpunk trope. Hell, now that I think about it, I think the same could be said for the story as a whole. It's not bad at all, but in a lot of ways it just feels like a stereotypical cyberpunk fare. This makes the story feel a bit bland, and ultimately, since a lot of it is told while you're trying to run or focus on platforming, I felt like I wasn't really able to remember anything too of note from the story. One issue I had with the game was I felt like the difficulty was really inconsistent at times. I felt like the game was way tougher in the start before you received all of your different abilities. You eventually hit this one pretty difficult boss, which will probably kick your ass over and over again, but afterwards, the city sections felt easier than previous sections. Part of it was I felt like they started introducing enemies and obstacles which weren't actually harder to beat than earlier ones, and as a result, I felt like mid and late game weren't as difficult as they maybe should have been. I also think there was some missed potential with some of the platforming and fighting mechanics they introduced. Hacking, for example, felt like it could have had a much larger part in the platforming, but after the few sections that used it, it pretty much never came up again. One other small issue I had was that although there are plenty of checkpoints on each level, none of these were permanent saves. So say your computer crashed or you need to sign off for whatever reason, the game would restart you at the beginning of the level again and you had to redo it all over. Overall, I think Ghostrunner was definitely an enjoyable experience, but I think due to some frustrating sections, it's a game that I'll likely never try to play again. It would be cool if they allowed workshop mods to allow people to make custom levels, but otherwise, I think I'm okay with the game as is. It can be brutally difficult, and you'll get your ass kicked over and over again, but eventually, you do get there. The game can probably take anywhere from 5 to 10 hours depending on how good you are, but replayability in my opinion would be limited to grabbing collectibles, or if you're trying to speedrun the game. The game does a lot well, but again, with its difficulty, it's definitely not a game for everyone. I would probably say it's a bit light on content for the $30 price tag, and would say if you're okay with waiting, I would wait for it to be around $20 or less. But hey, that's just me. If you've been playing Ghostrunner, feel free to let me know your thoughts, I'd love to discuss the game. And if you made it this far, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button as it would help my channel grow. Feel free to let me know any other games you think I should try and I'll definitely try to get to them. And as usual, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.